To begin, let me state that I am not insane. I am aware that this will come across as deluded, insane, and paranoid. However, I promise that everything I'm going to share with you is true. It began with a face, or rather a series of faces that all had a little strange appearance. My relationship with my ex-boyfriend, Caleb, ended 3 months ago. After nearly 2 years of dating, it was time for us to split up. Caleb wasn't aggressive at all. I was never hit by him. However, he was possessive and domineering in that subtle and cunning manner. It might be the worst possible way. He would monitor my phone usage and ask me questions about my day's activities to see whether I would repeat the same response. I disabled my social media accounts, changed my phone number, and even moved apartments when I broke up with him. I believed that I was safe. The barista then arrived. The morning was a Tuesday. I visited this tiny, obscure coffee shop close to my new residence. Only once or twice had I gone there. The barista, a girl my age, grinned at me as I approached the counter, but something in her face caused me to halt. "Good morning, sunshine," she replied, tilting her head. Caleb had given me that nickname, so I froze. It wasn't very common. When I was sad, he would cynically respond, "What's wrong, sunshine?" He liked to press buttons. I dismissed it. Perhaps it was a coincidence, but it occurred once more. I got a rideshare to work a few days later, and the driver was older than usual, possibly in his 60s. He asked me if I ever realized out what I was running from, after he continued looking in the rearview mirror as if he was trying to identify me. He spoke as casually as possible. I just said, "What?" He simply shook his head and laughed, as if I knew a joke. I heard Caleb say that once. He inquired, leaning in gravely after I told him I needed time to think things out, "Have you ever discovered what you're fleeing?" Strangers have now verbatim repeated what he said. It continued, "You don't get to just disappear," a woman hissed to me after bumping into me at the grocery store. As he went by, a man on the street said, "You're still wearing your hair like that?" Another, who worked in my building, sang the exact song Caleb used to play when we got into arguments and said, "You always liked this song." I wasn't frightened by their faces. The way they gazed at me was the cause. As if they knew me, or believed they did. Despite having distinct appearances, they all shared the same expressions in their eyes. I began to fear that I was losing my mind. What else, after all, could account for it? So I did something of which I felt ashamed. I didn't speak with Caleb personally. His sister received a message from me. "Tell him to stop," I told her. Perhaps he hired a private detective, I thought. Perhaps he was pulling strings, telling people stuff about me, or stalking me. All I wanted was for it to end. The next day, she replied via text, "I'm not sure what you're talking about. Caleb is undergoing treatment. He hasn't had a phone there for 6 weeks." I didn't think she was real. I thought she was a front for him. That is until a week later when she shared a photo of him holding one of those one-day sober chips and looking pale and sunken in. So it couldn't be Caleb, directly anyway. But I couldn't get rid of the impression that these strangers were aware of inappropriate information. I remained late at work one night. My flat no longer seemed secure, so I didn't want to return home. I just didn't like being by myself, not that anything negative occurred inside. I eventually decided to call it a night at around 9:30. With my head down and headphones in, but no music playing, I walked the 5 minutes to my house. I figured out how to do it so I could still hear if I was being followed. I noticed someone sitting on the porch of the building across from mine as I turned the corner onto my block. A young man with his head down and his hoodie up. It wasn't until he spoke that I nearly ignored him. cold out tonight, huh, sunshine?" he said. I stopped moving. He avoided looking at me. Like he was reading something on the sidewalk, he just gazed at it. I passed without a word, walking slowly. I went upstairs when I arrived at my building and secured all the bolts of the door. I spent hours listening to nothing while I sat on the couch. I eventually dozed off. When I woke up the following morning, my doormat was overturned. I live alone, and the door to my apartment is on the top floor, so that might not seem like a big problem. You don't just happen to pass my house. There was something written in pen on the underside of my mat. It stated that even if you want to change your appearance, I will still be able to identify you. I puked, even though I had no idea what that signified. I made a hotel reservation for the weekend on that day. I didn't pack anything when I left my place. I didn't feel secure enough to even grab clothing. All I needed was a packed place. I was given a room on the 5th floor by the hotel clerk. It felt secure despite being compact, silent, and somewhat stuffy. But only until someone knocked on my door at around 1 in the morning. 3 slow knocks were heard. I waited while sitting up in bed. They knocked once again. When I finally looked through the peehole, I saw a woman, possibly in her 60s. She had a completely expressionless and blank face. She was only looking at the door. I didn't make a sound because she didn't say anything, and she gradually walked away. It was among the most unsettling things I had ever witnessed. I inquired at the front desk the following morning if anyone had visited my room. According to them, nobody ought to have been up there, particularly at that hour. Every room on my floor was empty. Then something clicked. These folks weren't just anybody. My details were being provided to them. They were given language that Caleb used. But who would do it, and why, if it weren't Caleb? Caleb's fixation with control and making sure I was never completely gone crossed my mind while he was in rehab. He only needed to send people to knock. He didn't have to do it himself. I began my investigation and came across a conversation I remembered several months prior to the split. Caleb was discussing a forum he was a part of where people exchanged strategies. He gave the impression that it was for self-improvement or productivity. I can't remember what it was called. To be honest, I don't believe he actually told me the name. But looking back, it sounded like some eerie cult role-playing nonsense. But it's actually occurring to me. In order to keep me aware of him, even if he was no longer in my life, someone, likely Caleb, had recruited others to replicate his speech patterns and repeat his phrases, not in the conventional sense of the word stalking. Psychological graffiti was what he was. I couldn't be certain who I was looking at because he seemed to be spraying himself on random people. I believe it's more about making sure I never stop watching for him than it is about monitoring me. I moved once again and stopped using social media. I even got my hair colored. I instructed people to keep my location a secret. Until last week, it worked. A woman commented, "Sunshine, you're still hiding behind books," as she passed me on the street as I was making my way home from the bookstore. She didn't pause her stride to gaze at me. I don't believe this will ever end. For a year, he might have paid some strange underground service to do this to me. Who knows? Maybe he revealed it to the world. It's possible that this is a weird underground game. Who is the best at frightening sunshine? Without making contact, who can get the closest? No one's face is trustworthy now. My mental health is really suffering as a result of the persistent paranoia. Everyone in my family was shocked away when my aunt suggested a trip to one of Michigan's Great Lakes because we are all homebodies who don't travel. We both agreed that we wanted to make new memories with one another. Considering the cost, my cousin's reservation of a roomy Airbnb that managed to fit all 18 of us felt miraculous. With stunning views of the lake that stretched for miles, almost like an ocean, the house was situated just on the beach. Due to the size of our party, some of us were sent to a second structure right behind the main house, even though the majority of us claimed rooms there. There are bedrooms upstairs and a 2-story garage. I was given the task of sleeping there with my 3 cousins. We didn't give it much thought at first. The first day was mostly spent lounging on the beach, taking in the view, and using the hot tub. We didn't actually enter the garage until nightfall. The accommodation was dilapidated and unmaintained, with moldy-smelling carpeted bathrooms, discolored bed linens, and a door lock that was not securely fastened. The cleaners obviously disregarded the garage in favor of the main house. I proposed that we do washing since my cousins were repulsed and wouldn't sleep on the mattresses until the sheets were cleaned. We could only handle 1 set of bed linens at a time due to the small size of the machines, and it was clear that we would be up late. We waited for the first load upstairs while killing time. I began to feel apprehensive, as if something horrible was about to happen, while my cousin Maria moaned about how we ended up stuck in the worst position. I've previously experienced this uncommon form of intuition, which typically results in a nightmare or worse. My cousins listened to me when I advised them to be on the lookout, especially because we had all been burglarized while we lived in Detroit. The wash was completed when the bell rang from the first floor at around midnight. Taking the load into the dryer and bringing up the fresh-smelling linens, I headed downstairs by myself. I kept walking up and down between cycles, washing everyone's sheets, since my cousin wanted their bedding washed too after seeing how clean they were. We were ultimately finished at approximately 3 a.m. We were too exhausted to stay up any longer after making the beds. They all went to sleep soon, but I stayed up doing some schoolwork on my phone, since my cousin Nikki demanded that we keep the light on. I've been a light sleeper ever since the break-in, and even when I'm half asleep, I'm still quite conscious of my surroundings. Then, at around 1 in the morning, there was a loud bang, as if someone had thrown their body into the garage door. My relatives remained motionless, but I sat up in shock. The noise was too loud for me to believe that it was just wind. I attempted to sleep and remain silent, but it kept happening, the same loud crash. Shaking the garage door this time, the impact caused the building to vibrate. Now that I was completely awake, I could see my cousin still sleeping in the lamp-lit room. That couldn't be caused by a wind gust or an animal. The third explosion occurred a few minutes later. Eventually, 2 of my cousins bolted upright as the garage rocked once more. Knowing the answer, I inquired if they had heard that. When Nikki inquired what that was, I replied, "I don't know, but I've heard it 3 times." We all agreed that the sound could not have been caused by wind. Nikki recommended texting my aunt, her mother, so we did. She realized something major must be happening when she responded in the morning. My uncle was awakened by her and hurried outside to inspect the property. Until we heard a knock, we remained upstairs too scared to move. My dad, a couple of our older male relatives, and my uncle were standing at the door when we opened it. I realized then that it was serious. No one was playing around and there was no wind. My uncle instructed us to gather our belongings before heading to the main residence. My heart sunk when he indicated that there was someone on the premises. We all hurried out of the garage after I packed everything into my luggage. The majority of the family awoke from the chaos and noise once they were inside the main house. Sitting in the living room, we attempted to put everything together. My cousins confirmed the third loud crash after I informed them about the first 2. My aunt explained that she followed my uncle when he went out to investigate it. He called out to a person behind the garage. There was no breeze to explain why the main house door crashed behind her at that moment. She hurried to wake my dad and cousins because she thought someone might have broken into the house. There was no one else inside after searching. Subsequently, my uncle recounted his observations. A man was standing behind the garage, staring as if he wanted to be noticed, yet he was neither moving nor concealing. The man did not recoil when my uncle yelled. He just walked away and vanished. Into thin air, not into the dark. No footsteps were heard and the leaves on the ground did not crunch. Another person who doesn't make up stories is my uncle. It was all the more terrifying because he is a serious, rational man. According to my brothers, they found 2 jester cards, one in the garage and one in the main house. The one in the garage had a demon-like appearance and was twisted. The loud noises occurred about 3 a.m., the so-called devil's hour, and one cousin pointed out that jesters are a sign of mockery. We felt like we were being made fun of. Even though my uncle looked for tracks, he only found his and my cousin's, not the man's. During the incident, another relative drove down the road in an attempt to see if anyone was running, but she was unsuccessful. Nobody came back to the garage that day. We crammed ourselves into couches, floors, and every available space in the main house. In order for us to sleep more peacefully, my mom gave up her bed. She slept on a couch near the wide windows on the second night, and she woke up in the morning to the sound of footsteps on the porch. She was afraid to open her eyes. She feared that someone would be peering in. Then she heard a person attempting to open the basement door. My brothers and male cousins were sleeping down there, and the latch was flimsy. Someone tried to break in, and the door rattled. My mom hurried to the basement, but by the time she arrived at the door by the beach, the boys were all sound sleeping and nobody was there. That was our last night. We left on Monday, even though our original goal was to stay until Tuesday. We couldn't stop gossiping about what happened on the drive home. My mom speculated that someone might have been observing me and believed I was alone in the garage when she found out that I had been going downstairs by myself while doing laundry. The banging noises coincided too closely with the period between my last walk downstairs and our bedtime. Theory began to take shape. Some of us assumed the neighbor was trying to frighten us away. Others thought there was a paranormal element, especially due to the jester cards. When my uncle saw them, a normal person would have bolted, but this man chose not to, according to my aunt. He just observed and vanished. The owner on Airbnb said she had watched the video from the camera above the garage door, but we never heard back. Did she know the man? Did he live next door? My sister and cousin had passed a woman next door when we first got there on their way to the beach. She looked at them icily, without greeting or kindness, just an inhospitable stare. We were considerate even though we recognized that frequent Airbnb visitors could irritate the residents because the house was in a remote area. We weren't worthy of what happened. We hope that this will be our first family vacation, even though we have experienced so much. I recently moved into a new home with my lover. In all honesty, it's the house of our dreams and the ideal match for us. When we first moved in, everything felt great since we rescued a puppy named Doom together. At first, the house on our right was the only issue. The owner had begun renovations but didn't finish them, so it appeared abandoned. The houses are arranged so that the entrance to our backyard is on our right, and the entrance to the abandoned house's backyard is next to it. Since the owner cut down the fence to install a new one but never finished, there is no fence between both of them, allowing full access to both the back gardens. There is additional property behind the abandoned house that is fenced off. Several young males lived there based on what we could see. On occasion, we would see them slicing through the neighbor's backyard to get to the front of the street when we got home. At first, we hadn't given it much thought. Perhaps they obtained permission because they knew the owner. Let's go ahead to our first evening in the new home. Mostly due to interest, we glanced up at the houses behind us while we were enjoying the back garden. At that moment, we saw a man standing at a window, staring at us blankly. He wasn't trying to hide it. He was extremely clear about it. His face was expressionless, and the darkness of the room added to the eerie atmosphere. We thought he was merely interested in his new neighbors, but when he stared at us blankly for 30 minutes, we made the decision to go inside. The days that followed were typical. While I went to work, my fiancé kept unpacking. We made the decision to sit in the garden once more one evening. Even though it was dark, we enjoyed stargazing and serious chats until we heard someone moving the temporary wooden board fence. A trio of men materialized, standing there and gazing at us. "Are you all right?" Knowing they wouldn't go unless I spoke, I asked. We didn't know what was in the large bag that the youngest person in the group was clutching. We refused his offer of some pilfered washing pills. The situation seemed so embarrassing that I joked about it. He laughed and said, "Okay." After that, he left. The way they entered our garden without saying anything is like they had every right to be there really got my attention. Thinking it was an isolated incident, we went back inside, but things only got worse from there. They started entering our garden more frequently and behaving in ways that were obviously intended to scare us. The fence between the rear gardens would be lifted, and they would enter the property next door. I forgot to explain that my girlfriend and I are both rather old, so naturally, our initial thought was that they might be attempting to frighten us as young ladies. 2 policemen came around the side of our house and into the deserted garden one day while I was cleaning the front room. After raising the fence and taking a few minutes to survey the area, they left silently. Even though I found it odd, I continued with my day, figuring that perhaps the neighbors were causing trouble. The police knocked on our door a few days later. The house behind us was now empty, they explained. The men were expelled due to their antisocial behavior, which seemed to extend beyond their interactions with us to other neighbors. To be honest, we were relieved. They would not have the opportunity to exacerbate the situation, even though they had not yet taken any concrete action. We were getting settled in the house, but one day I heard a big bang outside while I was taking a bath. I hurried to get dressed and went in search of my girlfriend. From our spare bedroom window, which overlooks the now empty house's garden, I found her filming something. She shushed me when I asked what was happening. A moment later, she explained, a man we had never seen before pointed up at our bedroom window, and he ran straight for our house when she saw him. Before running back into the garden and throwing the broken fence up, he attempted the handle on our door as he was leaving. Then he started hammering on all the windows of the vacant house. We quickly dialed the cops. They arrived, viewed the video, made a statement, and then left. It shook us. Why would they break into that residence after trying our door handle? What did he intend to do? A few nights later, we were in bed when we heard whistling, the type of whistle that men use to intimidate women. The time was 3 a.m. For a moment of silent listening, we heard a tap on our window. We checked the cameras in fear, but they seemed to capture nothing. The noises stopped soon after, so whatever it was must have gone. The following day, we spent the night at my mom's since we were too scared to sleep. Our Ring doorbell had been taken out and left on the floor. There was no SD card left. Clearly, someone had returned. We knew who it was. Who else would do that? When we called the police once more, they advised us to keep all the windows and doors locked. We were even more alarmed when the woman on the phone implied that taking the camera away would indicate that they were preparing something. At least she was truthful, though. For weeks, the banging, whistling, and attempts to re-enter the house persisted. We reported several things to the police. We hoped it was over because they never tried our door again. But 3 weeks later, we checked the live feed while watching amusing videos from our camera while we were in bed. At that moment, we noticed a man standing in front of our yard with his arms spread wide, like he was mimicking Jesus on the cross, wearing a black mask that covered his mouth and nose with his hood up. He turned his head and gazed up at our bedroom window. We stopped. To prevent it from recording, we had moved the camera inside the house at the time. We didn't even think about screen recording because we were so shocked. Then he started talking, but we couldn't hear him. After that, he turned around, across the street and stood for a few minutes just looking at our house. We made another police call. They ignored the entire situation, claiming that it was not against the law to gaze at someone's property. They even acted as if we were exaggerating when we told them what he had done on our property. We spent days unable to sleep. We were frightened by any noise outdoors, even everyday ones. Then one morning, we received a notification. I woke my girlfriend and said, "Someone's outside." "I know that. Check the camera, please." She did. Two masked men were approaching from the side of our house, illuminating our windows with their flashlights. One of them was carrying what appeared to be a crowbar. It was the same man who had been bugging us. Why us? What was this all about? He would stand across the street and point, wave, or yell things up at our window for days on end. He would look at us blankly every time we looked. It was obviously intended to frighten us, and it succeeded. We kept communication with the police, but they haven't done much. The harassment is still going on. We feel helpless even though we have cameras now and capture everything. He was standing outside looking up at us just now. We're horrified after seeing it on camera, but we'll keep you updated if anything else occurs.